Why, hello, Clay Kids. Today, we are going to start making some mugs that are pinched and using coils, and we're going to add on a beautiful functional handle. So let me tell you, first of all, the parts of the pot. Let me put that one down. We have a big body of our mug, and then this part down here is called the rim or the foot because it's what the mug stands on. So it's going to stand up. You can see that it makes it have a much lovelier shape. So it's got this big wide shape, and then it kind of goes in and flares, so that's really attractive. This part up here we call the lip or the rim, and this is the part we're going to drink out of. And we eventually want to make sure it's nice and thin. We don't want to have to get a huge mug that's hard to drink out of. And we're going to have a handle that is nice and strong so it can pick up our mug. This one has a lot of textured stamps on it. Some I did with a tool and some I did with some little handmade stamps here in the classroom. If you're doing it at home, you might have all kinds of things that you can stamp on it. Sometimes I find good marker tops or any little interesting shapes that are going to give you some texture on your surface. Who knows, maybe even something natural, maybe plants or something. You'll find lots of things. So to make this, we are going to use two different techniques. You've already done pinch pots. You all made your lovely, lovely heart pinch pots. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a pinched form for the bottom. We're going to make it as large and as tall as we can. Then we're going to add on the extra stuff that we need with our coils. And so I've been pinching this a little bit, and as you all know, you want to choose a piece of clay that has good plasticity. You don't want it to be too dry. You don't want it to be so plastic that it's like melty or doesn't hold its form. And I'm making sure to burnish the rim with my fingers as I go along so I don't get any little cracks. Now your mug could be any shape and any form you want. It does not have to be, you know, a traditional round mug. You could make it lots of different shapes and have it be fun, as long as you are using the pinch technique and the coil technique in adding a foot and adding a handle. So I'm continuing to pinch, and I'm trying to make this pinch pot a little taller than I am wider. So I'm pressing and kind of almost pulling up with my fingertips. You all have had some experience now pinching, and so you know how the pinching works, how you can put more pressure with your thumb on the outside to make it wider, or kind of more pressure evenly and it kind of goes upward. So you're going to be able to control your form. I want to make it as smooth and even as possible. I want my walls to be an even thickness, and I'm now using my thumb to kind of burnish the inside and make it nice and smooth. We don't want to have a lot of textures on the inside or any seams because we want to be able to drink out of these. And if there's a lot of texture down there, sometimes it's hard to wash really well, and it's best probably to hand wash these. So I'm just pinching and making it nice and even, and I'm going for a shape that's maybe like 3 or 4 inches across. Now I've got some little crackling on my back side, and if I want to, I can use a tool or my fingers. I've cut a little piece of plastic from actually a lid of a coffee container, and I can just use that to smooth and burnish out. You can also, if you're in the classroom or if you have tools at home, you can use like a little wooden tool to burnish. And if you want to eventually, you could always use a little bit of water and your fingertip to kind of like smooth out the surface. And you can do that if it's getting a little bit too dry anywhere. So I have a pretty good form. I'm just making sure my bottom is a little bit taller. You can see I'm just making little tiny pinches, tiny little pinches, controlling my form. Sometimes I have thick bottoms. I'm working on that, kids, working on it. Okay, so now I'm pretty content with this shape. And right now I'm gonna just kind of press it to make it sit flat there. Maybe that's better. And so now what I'm gonna do is I am going to use these coils that I rolled out ahead of time, because it takes me a while to roll coils. So I just used a long piece, then I rolled, and sometimes I roll from the center outward to get it as even as possible. Now I've got a pretty thick coil. It's about the thickness of my finger. Maybe I want it to be a little smaller, but I can actually just pinch it smaller as I go along. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just lay this coil right on top of my pottery piece, right even. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend it in to add some height to my mug. So maybe I want to go right about there and squeeze it off so it's kind of even. So what I'm going to do now, you can see I've just kind of added that to get my basic form. Now what I want to do is I want to blend it so that form is all one even form. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my hand on the inside to give that wall some pressure, and then I am blending it using the strength of my thumb. So I'm putting some pretty firm pressure because I really have to press that clay. That clay was kind of firm, and so I'm pressing it and blending it into the other surface. I didn't slip and score this because I'm just blending it right away, blending it right on, and so it will adhere really well. If it's a little bit thicker, what I'm going to be able to do is then use my pinching skills to thin it out again. And that's a great way to build. So you can see that I'm just blending. I'm going to pinch it on the inside a little bit just to get it a little bit more even. And you can see it's a little taller over here. Maybe I've got to add a little bit more over there, but I'm going to continue to blend. So this blending is going to take me a little bit. I want to make sure that I do not see any of those coil lines. I thought I had another. So sometimes I will use this tool again to smooth it. Really make sure it's blended on. Kind of gets rid of my finger marks. I can use it this way. And as the clay gets drier, I'll be able to even smooth it, probably even more, get it really perfect. So this tool alone doesn't really blend it so well. I really need to use my fingers with some force. Now, once I've blended the outside, that's all kind of blended. I can kind of see some of my coil marks in the shadow there. On the inside, I still have those coils, so now I want to blend those out. So to do that, I'm putting my hand on the outside, and I'm using my thumb. It's kind of hard to see on the inside, and I'm putting pressure, and I'm blending those coils. And I've got some cracking on my rim, so I'm just blending. And when I'm blending, I'm kind of pinching a little bit, and it's looking good. So I'm blending out all my coils, blending it together to make a strong wall on my piece of pottery, on my eventual mug. So I'm blending. And now maybe I'm going to work on the form a little bit. It's a little like my lip is uneven. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it a little bit because it's a little thicker right there. So I'm just going to use my pinching skills to make it as perfect as possible. So I'm pinching a little thinner so that it's growing a little taller, and it's also making it so the rim is nice and neat. Like if you think about what you drink out of at home, like you've got nice even pieces of, like maybe you've got mugs or maybe glass cups. They're even and they're nice to drink out of. Like you don't want to have a jagged edge. You don't want to have a really thick lip to it that's hard to drink out of. So I'm smoothing some more. And I'm pretty happy with it overall. Now I'm seeing that this part might be, see how it's not quite even? I will probably take a tool when it's done and maybe trim some of that off. Like maybe I would take a little fettling knife and like trim it, or sometimes I even take an X-Acto knife. I admit to using an X-Acto knife a lot, so I might just like trim anything off that's like a little bit lumpy. So I'll work on getting that more and more perfect. But right now I'm pretty happy with my form. So it's about maybe 4 inches high, 4 inches wide. We're making it a touch bigger because our clay is going to shrink when it goes in the kiln. Now what I want to do, I've got this basic form, and I want to add the foot on the bottom to make it more attractive, so it has like a little pedestal that it sits on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that right upside down, and sometimes I just smooth my bottom out a little bit to make sure it's the shape I want. I might actually work on that a little bit longer before I would do this in real life. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another lovely coil, and I can decide what I want it to do. Maybe I just want a little tiny foot. Maybe I want it to kind of flare out a little bit. So I'm kind of pressing where I want it to be. And I've got it slightly flaring, but I think it's going to flare even more once I blend it. So again, what I want to do is give it support in the back. So I'm supporting it in the back with my thumb, and I'm smoothing, 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 blending it so we don't see that seam at all. So it looks like one surface. Maybe I'm not there yet. I've got to use my tool a little bit. So I'm pressing, really blending it together so it creates a surface of clay. So it's not just coils. Well, maybe people would never even know it was built out of coils once they see it because they won't see your coils. Blending, blending, giving support on the back, blending a lovely, lovely foot. And then I'm going to do a little bit more over here real quick. Then I'm going to blend the inside as well. So I'm blending, blending, and then of course I would want it to look really nice and neat. So I would spend some time maybe with my little scraper tool. I would scrape and kind of keep it even. That kind of makes the surface even so that we don't see individual little marks from like our fingertips. So I can kind of curve this. So you probably have all kinds of like recyclable plastic at home if you're a home person, and I've got lots of them here in school. Sometimes it is cheaper to make our tools than buy them. So I'm just blending a little bit more. Now what I'm going to do, my inside of my foot, you can see the coils, so I want to do the same thing. I want to give it some support on the outside, and I'm blending, 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 blending my clay together to make my lovely foot. And I'm going to blend it really well. So I'm trying to get all those marks out of there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch it so it flares outward a little bit. Like I want to think about how it looks, how the silhouetted shape of my piece of pottery looks. And I've got a little lump right there, so maybe I'm going to pinch it. Maybe I'll end up trimming it. Maybe what I could do, like if you don't like the look of a whole pedestal like that, this has got some work to happen to it, but maybe if you don't like that, you could even cut it. Like maybe I want to take my X-Acto knife and cut some negative space on my foot. Like maybe I want to have like 4 individual little feet with a little bit of negative space underneath. That could be kind of pretty. Let's test it out and see. Now, the only thing about this is it's going to make it a little bit weaker right now. It might not hold it up immediately. But I could fool around like getting it all nice and having like 4 individual little feet, smoothing the form. I'll probably work on this quite a bit more. But you can see that gives it like some little feet to hang out with. Now, you can see right now my form has got some weird shadows, so I would need to really work and get that maybe a little rounder, maybe press it out. But I've got my basic form, so now I'm going to like work on it more. Now the next thing we're going to do is make a handle for your mug. Oh, can I put that right there? So what I usually like to do, I've got a pretty firm piece of clay here, and I am going to stretch it out a little bit. I'll move this over. So usually I don't roll on a cloth because it sticks, so I like to roll right on my surface. So I am rolling it out and deciding that maybe I want this thickness, but maybe I need it to be a little bit flatter. So I'm going to use my pinching skills. I actually kind of made a little texture, and I kind of like that. So maybe I'm going to decide, slowly curve it, and decide what kind of handle I want. I'm getting some little crackles, but maybe I want to do kind of a shape like this, and then see how I think it's going to look. So I'll often do that, and then I will cut it. Let me see if I can make it so you can see it. I like to cut it, let me cut it and then hold it up, kind of at a diagonal where I can see it's going to connect to my piece of pottery. Now that handle looks too big because it's touching way down there. So maybe I'm going to curve it a little bit more and trim off a little bit right there and decide if that looks good. So you're going to be able to control your shape. And if you want more than one handle, you could have more than one handle. That could be kind of fun. So what I'll do is I'll decide where it's going to be. And what I like to do, hi there, I'm gonna kind of center it between my negative spaces. I'm gonna kind of sketch on where my handle is gonna be. I don't know if you can see those little marks. And I'm gonna use a sharp tool to rough it up, to make my score marks. We wanna rough up because remember we talked about the little cells that make up the clay and how they're little tetrahedrons. We need those clay cells to like join together and be really strong, make a strong bond. So I'm gonna rough up both surfaces really well. The rougher the better. So I'm getting it kind of roughed up. And then we can use either a little bit of slip or some liquidy clay. I've got some in this bottle. This might be too liquidy. Watch it squirt all over me. Oh, kids, sometimes it gets dry. We have to clean out the top. So I'm just gonna squeeze a little bit on there. It's not coming out. Kids, this is when I have to open it up. And I'm just gonna pour a little bit on. Oh, why do I always have to sneeze during my presentations? Again, kids, that's why I'm never gonna be a YouTuber. So now I've got my two surfaces and I'm gonna press really, really firm. I am pressing it firmly on the bottom and on the top. So I'm putting pressure on the outside and the inside, making sure that it's really well bonded. Now, if your wall is weak, what could happen is that the weight of your handle could kind of stretch it out and kind of make it go out of form. It all depends on your clay. So sometimes what I do is I make almost like a little crutch to kind of hold it up while I work on it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my wooden tool to smooth the surface, smooth everywhere where it's joined so that I don't see those join marks. So I'm going to smooth, smooth, smooth. You probably can't even see this on your side. So I want it to look like it is, like see there, you can see that it's like not showing at all. So that's what I want to do. Now if I need to, sometimes if my clay is a little bit wet, what I'll do is I'll add another little coil right in there just to give it some extra strength, and I will smooth it on. Now what we're going to do next is I would let this kind of firm up before I smooth it too much, but I would keep working on it. It all depends on how plastic your clay is, but you might be able to add some decorations. Let me get mine. So, whoops. So I've got some stamps right here. I like this one. It's got a nice leaf design. So if I wanted to, I could smooth my surface. Once I have it pretty finished, like maybe I would even just want to get some of those little cracklies out with like a little sponge or a little moistened finger. But what I can do now is I can put my hand on the inside and then I can stamp a design right on. Let's see how this looks. Oh, it might have been a little too sticky. Nope, we've got a nice leaf design. It kind of went off the top because I'm doing it backwards. But maybe I want to put like a little leaf designs all over. And so I could, sometimes if the stamp is long, I kind of roll it. And so we want to add some surface decorations. Now my clay is getting a little bit dry, so I'm just going to add a little bit to the rim. Now what you want to do when you're all done with your mug, before you get it totally cleaned up, I would definitely let mine sit upside down because of the way I did my little feet. I would get it all perfect as I can, blending, blending. And then what you want to do is you want to keep it in a bag so that it doesn't dry out too quickly. So you can keep it in there, and when it gets a little firmer, you can get it out and get it as perfect as possible using all your tools, getting it perfectly smooth. But if you're a home person, still keep it in your bag. If it dries too quickly, what will happen, the handle will dry first because it's so thin and there's so much air around it. And if it dries first, when it dries, it's going to shrink, and it will shrink right away from the body of the clay, which is thicker and drying slowly, and your handle will often just fall off. So anytime we have a seam or we've added things, we want it to dry really, really slow. So if you're here in class, we'll wrap them up and put them in my cupboard. But if you're at home, just find some plastic. It could be a plastic bag, saran wrap, whatever is going to keep it nice and moist. And then if you can, get it to me here at the school while it's still wrapped up and still not quite dry. Because when it gets bone dry, you know that it can break really easily. So that is how we're going to make our mug. We're pinching the bottom, the body part of it, then adding some rims of coils and smoothing them, adding a little foot so that it has a beautiful silhouette, and then adding a functional handle and adding texture or designs. So you could do your texture with any tool you have. You could even just use your fingers. You could use stamps. You could imprint, whatever you like, kids. And then we'll paint them too. So that's our next assignment. Hopefully that helps you understand it. Bye, everybody.